We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back on Liberty Nation Radio. I'm your host, Mark Angelides, and we're back with Liberty Nation senior political analyst and long-time host of this here show, Tim Donner. Now, I think we've run the gamut on pretty much everything to do with the debate. So what I'd like to delve into now, Tim, is polling. Now, prior to the debate, it seemed that, obviously we haven't had, at the time of recording, we haven't had any polls post-debate yet. But it seemed that the gap that Kamala Harris had edged was closing very rapidly, and in some places, especially the New York Times Siena polling, had Trump in the lead. How do you think these trends are going to move as we move away from the aftermath of the debate?
I'm not sure that national polls are of any real significance at this point. I mean, after all, in 2016, Trump lost the popular vote and won the election. In 2020, Trump lost the popular vote by quite a bit more and still almost won the election. So I think it's nice to get a general sense of if a campaign is heading up or down in national polling, but it really matters in these 7 battleground states. And what Harris has done basically is to take the negative numbers that Joe Biden had because of his age and cognitive condition and wiped out those voters who said, I can't vote for him because he's addled. He's not all there. They don't have that complaint about Harris. So most people have gone back to their corners, and that 2, 3, 4-point lead that Donald Trump had, I think we're now seeing that was largely because of Joe Biden. And so with Kamala Harris there, I think this race is so close that neither candidate can rightly claim that they're leading. I think Trump has a structural advantage, the same structural advantage he had before. I think someone like Nate Silver has narrowed it down to the Electoral College and gives Trump about a 60% chance of winning. But that's with 2 months to go, and Kamala Harris still has to complete the palette of who she is. She has to continue painting the picture of who Kamala Harris is and what she needs to do to win this race as an underdog. She is the underdog, but she's not trailing by much, if at all. So I think we've got a 2-month sprint here, less than 2-month sprint to Election Day. And it's absolutely impossible to know where Kamala Harris is going to go from here because she's brand new, essentially. Whereas I think Trump's numbers stay largely the same because he is such a known quantity. I mean, he rarely lets a thought go unexpressed, as we know. And and so I think that we're headed to the land of the unknown, unlike almost anything we've seen, perhaps since Bush versus Gore, which of course was decided by about 560 votes in one state, Florida. As of now, that's what it looks like. But there's still a lot of, there's a surprising amount of openness in the electorate that we didn't really have the last 2 years. We have 5%, up to 5% who are undecided, which could be 7 million people, as many as 7 million people. So there's still fluidity to this race, probably more than there would have been with Joe Biden and more than there was in 2020.
You know, I think that's fascinating that you say about how Trump supports kind of staying steady. And it will be essentially...
He's at 46%. I think he can count on 46% as his base because he's at 46% approval. He essentially got about 46% the last 2 times, which means that just under half the country knows Trump and pretty much knows who he is, knows his assets and liabilities, and has decided to vote for him, at least as of now. Right. So
what that tells us is that this is Kamala Harris essentially has to try and plot an upward course. She has to do, and to do that, I think there's maybe three things that she has to do. One, she has to separate herself from the Biden administration in which she serves. Number two, as you say, she has to complete the color palette of what and who she is and who she'll be as a president. And number three, she has to try and convince people that they're better off under the Democratic Party than they were under the Republican Party headed by Donald Trump. And I think that last element there might be the most difficult hill for her to climb. How does she go about doing that? How does she manage that when really all the data is really against her?
Well, this is the sort of mirror image challenge that Al Gore faced in 2000, because Bill Clinton, when he left the White House in 2001, he was still at a very high approval level because the Republicans had largely overreached, and with the impeachment over the Monica Lewinsky thing and the like. And so Al Gore was faced with, do I run with Clinton using that as, hey, we've had peace and prosperity for 8 years now, I'm going to carry it on? Or does he say, I'm going to be different, I'm going to break away from the mold that Bill Clinton set? Well, he chose to break the mold and to go out on his own. And I think a lot of people questioned that decision. This time, Kamala Harris, a tougher road to hoe, because unlike Bill Clinton, Joe Biden was not popular. His policies were not popular. His approval was low, as hers has been. So it's a very, very tough dance to say we need more of the same, but we need less of the same. That's essentially what she's saying. And even the most skilled politician, a Barack Obama, a Bill Clinton, a Ronald Reagan, would have trouble towing that line.
Yes, I think you're probably right there, Tim. So let's talk a bit about how these numbers add up. There's two very quick points I want to jump on. One, we talked briefly about how there's a national polling thing, which I think an average of national polls puts Kamala Harris 1.5% ahead nationwide. And we have discussed this, but that really doesn't matter because for Donald Trump, because it's all the election will be decided in the battleground states. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think Ronald Reagan was the last Republican to win the popular vote. Does that sound about right?
No, George W. Bush won the popular vote in 2004. But if you look at 1992, 96, 2000, 2008, 12, 16, and 20, the Republicans lost the popular vote in every one of those elections. Now you see why Democrats want to get rid of the Electoral College. And if I was a Democrat, I probably would too, because they've won two. The Democrats have lost two presidential elections in this century where they won the popular vote. So, of course, they want to get rid of the Electoral College. It makes sense, but they won't be able to get rid of it. So, at least not now.
Well, they've got to play
the game when we talk
today.
As of today. But if they get the filibuster, if Harris is elected, they control the Senate and House, and they get the filibuster, all the radical ideas that Joe Manchin was able to prevent within the Democratic Party after the 2020 election will be back in play.
Yeah, and Kirsten Sinema, of course, she was also part of that little.
And the Electoral College, PAC, the Supreme Court, make D.C. and Puerto Rico states. This kind of stuff will be back on the agenda if Kamala Harris is elected and has a friendly Congress.
Just one final question for you, Tim, just about 30 seconds if you can. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Has now gone from support me, don't support me in battleground states, don't support me in red states, and now he's declared support Donald Trump everywhere. How much of an effect do you think that will have on both polling and the election?
Well, I think it's a head spinner for people, let's say, older than 50 years old who recall the greatness of the Kennedy clan within the Democratic Party. They were the family that defined the party for the longest time. Now he is attacking the party, saying it's not his father and grandfather's Democratic Party. And I think that's a head turner for people. And that when it comes down to the end and people say, do we want 4 more years of what we've just had? They look at Bobby Kennedy and say, well, he doesn't really have a dog in this hunt. He does now with Trump, but he doesn't really have a dog in the hunt. What does he think of his Democratic Party? So it will have an impact. The extent of the impact, hard to tell.
Tim Donner, thanks ever so much for being with us today.
Lots of fun, Mark. Appreciate it.
And that's all we have time for on this special edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I've been your host, Mark Angelides. I'd like to thank our guest, Tim Donner, Liberty Nation senior political analyst and longtime host of this here radio show. Remember, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates or campaigns or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. Thank you, the listeners at home, for tuning in each week to join us on the show. Thanks for being here.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.